All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you had a nice long weekend. Welcome back to another session of Keeping the Promise, Core Skills for Effective Land Stewardship, hosted in partnership with the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy. I'm Ricky Bentley. I'm the program manager at Connecticut Land Conservation Council. We are the statewide umbrella organization, represents all of the land trusts in Connecticut, and support your work through advocacy, technical assistance, and programs like this series. If you're not already subscribed to our e-news, I definitely recommend it. It's a great way to stay in touch with what we have going on, future webinar series and other programming. We're focusing on sharpening the practical skills needed to ensure the enduring integrity of our stewardship programs, helping all of us uphold that forever promise we make to the land and our communities. Uh, as in previous sessions, we have the Q&A function. Please feel free to type your questions into that during the session. We want this to be interactive, but we'll have a dedicated time at the end for answering questions and having some discussion. As well as our previous sessions, this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for future reference. And again, our fourth session on civil and legal recourse for encroachment resolution was rescheduled for next Tuesday, June 2nd, noon to 1:30. So hope to see you there. And today we have a great session lined up. We have Mariah Fogg from the Land Trust Alliance and Tom Worthley from Yukon to discuss management plans and stewardship planning. So I will turn it over to Mariah.
Ricky, get my slide up. There we go. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Um, hi everyone, welcome. I'm Mariah Fogg, as Ricky shared. I'm the New England Program Manager for the Land Trust. I'm manager. I'm the coordinator. We are hiring a New England Program Manager for the Land Trust Alliance, and I'm just really happy to be here with you all to discuss the land trust standards and practices that are related to land management plans for fee-owned land. So, to start us off, I just wanted to share, if you aren't familiar, the land trust standards and practices are the best practices that were developed by and for the land trust community to guide organizations in operating ethically, legally, and in the public interest. There are 12 standards total, and standards 1 through 7 are things common to all nonprofit organizations like governance, fundraising, financial oversight, human resources, those types of things. And the standards 8 through 12 are specific to land trust. So today we're going to talk about Standard 12, which is fee land stewardship, stating that land trusts have a program of responsible stewardship for the land held in fee for conservation purposes. And specifically, we're focusing on practice 12B, land management and stewardship. Diving into that more. One of the key ideas of practice 12B is that the land trust will develop a written land management plan within the first 12 months of acquiring a fee-owned property. And these four elements listed here include really support the foundation of a useful management plan. They're pretty much the basic building blocks for thinking through how a property is going to be cared for over time, since we're talking about perpetuity here. So some good news in thinking through this is that the information that goes into a land management plan is likely information that your organization is already gathering as part of an acquisition process. So this isn't really about starting from scratch or reinventing the wheel. It's really about bringing together sort of that information that you already have, the knowledge you're building through the acquisition process and visiting the property, getting to know it into a useful framework. And we'll dive into each of these elements shortly. Before going there, I just wanted to share, so that standard 12, kind of the umbrella, also includes a few additional practices beyond developing the management plan, but that are related. So that second practice is really about implementation, managing the property in accordance with the land management plan, and also updating that plan as needed over time. So it can be a living document. And then the third practice focuses on administrative responsibilities, things like maintaining insurance, filing required forms, keeping good records for the property. And that fourth practice is an important one because it really speaks to that bigger picture behind all of this work. It's about managing those fee-owned properties in a way that's really supporting your land trust public credibility, meeting those community expectations, and helping minimize risk. Okay, so now we'll dive into what actually goes into a land management plan under 12B and how those required elements show up in real world application, real world plans. And I want to emphasize again that the management plan doesn't need to be fully fleshed out right away. This is something that you can start sort of with the basics within the first 12 months and then build on it over time. Okay, so the first piece is identifying the property's conservation values. So, in other words, what is it about this property that made your land trust interested in protecting it? This can include natural resources, things like forests, wetlands, streams, water quality, might be important wildlife habitat, or have other ecological features that attracted your land trust to protect the land. In some cases, there could be cultural or historical resources, strong community recreational value. Maybe it's a place that folks have been regularly using and caring about for a long time. So that's kind of where you would flesh out this information. This section is really about identifying those values that you're stewarding and protecting them, for the long term. And element two is management goals. So what are you really trying to achieve over time for the property? What are those larger goals? Once you've identified kind of what's important about the land, you want to take this question into consideration. Maybe the goal is to maintain existing conditions like protecting a mature forest or intact wetlands. Maybe it's restoring habitat to improve water quality or support climate resilience. The possibilities could be endless, providing public access in that way. So this is the section in your land management plan where you could flesh out, could be a few bullet points or a few paragraphs. Just having some of those goals laid out can be really helpful. Element three outlines what actions will help achieve those goals. Are there stewardship projects that need to happen? Things like invasive species management. Are you planning to do some trail work, forestry? Do you have ongoing maintenance? Those types of things. It's also important. It's a good placeholder to think about what could threaten those conservation values that you listed over time. Are there neighboring land uses that could create issues? Any environmental pressures, flooding, any climate impacts to think about. Are there potential public use pressures on, a sensitive area? So this is a time to sort of think broadly, and again, doesn't have to be too detailed, but some of those, longer term risks that could be facing the property and impacting your conservation values. And finally, there's the broader question of appropriate uses for the property. So how should the land be used in a way that supports its conservation values? There's definitely some overlap here from the earlier elements, but this might include decisions around public access. It could mean identifying some areas that need additional protection or thinking through what uses are compatible with the property. So again, recreation, are you thinking about forestry, agriculture, or something else? And these decisions also do need to reflect any deed restrictions, easements, donor, funder requirements tied to the property. So important to note those. So really within that first year of ownership, the goal of a management plan is to start thinking more holistically about the property and put a roadmap together for how it will be cared for over time. So one really important framing here is that management plans, again, they don't need to be perfect at the outset, excuse me. The expectation is really to start with the required basics within the first 12 months And from there, the plan can be built and refined over time as you learn more about the property or capacity changes. And so sort of right sizing the plan both to the property, but also thinking about your organization's capacity is really important. The standards and practices were sort of set up to be a little bit flexible in that space where there can be sort of a baseline and then definitely opportunity to elaborate if you have the time and energy and interest in doing so. So in practice, that often means, starting with a simple, consistent approach across properties, something that feels maybe achievable, repeatable, and then building from there over time. We have a couple templates that I'll walk you through in just a moment. Those templates can just provide some consistency and also within those templates, there's opportunities to use repeatable language that kind of helps make the plans easier to create. And then, of course, diving in more detail over time. So some of those areas, thinking about consistency is ongoing maintenance. Maybe you have, a number of recreational trails on your fee-owned lands, and so you have this blurb about, how there's ongoing maintenance to care for those trails in your land management plans, and sort of copy and paste, adjust as needed. Um, so now I'd like to show you some templates, and just want to check on my timing here. All right, so this first template is an example of a land management plan from a land trust that I used to work for in Western Massachusetts. At the front of the plan, there's the list of sort of basic property information that really helps to just orient the reader right up front. And that includes things like the property name, any ID number, location, total acreage, date acquired. For this template, that who prepared the plan and when is summarized on the cover page of this template. And I did send that PDF to Ricky, so hopefully he can share that with you all so you can see it in the full spectrum. But after the basic information, the plan moves into a property description section, which includes site context and habitat types, as well as any permitted uses and restrictions that apply to the property. And this next section is where the conservation values are listed, along with the threats and opportunities to those conservation values. This sort of helps connect what's important about the property with what might be affecting it over time. And then the management recommendations section is where you often see more practical stewardship guidance, and there is some intentionally reusable language, I think, from my experience with these plans, especially again around things like trail maintenance and infrastructure upkeep. And then finally, the plan includes a registry of deeds reference and appendices, which pull together that supporting material like all the maps. We love maps in this work, and they can be very helpful in other, key documents. I think there's a soil description in here that goes along with the soil map. So that sort of thing can kind of be tacked along the end there. And it's a pretty simple example that I think really helps provide some consistency when at the time we were going through accreditation and making up for some, lack of management plans on some of our properties. All right, so this is another land management template. It was actually shared by Aaron at CLCC, and I really like it. I think he titled it Simple Management Plan. And so we'll start out here at the top. Similar to the previous example, it starts with basic property information. There's a little variation from the other one. It includes the property name and ID number, the location, assessor's map, block and lot, total acreage, habitat type, and the date acquired, who prepared the management and when, and the deed book and page. So really nice compiled information, a good snapshot. And from there, similar to the last one, it builds into an expanded set of additional information about the history and description of the property, the legal restrictions in the deed, conservation values, again, followed by those potential threats to the conservation values, and then, a few bullets of overall management goals. And again, I think some of these, I'm just guessing here, could be repeated language, protecting this high quality wetland and riparian habitat from disturbance. I feel like that's a blanket statement that could fit a lot of management goals for different properties. Similarly, monitoring invasive species and managing as appropriate, discouraging dumping and unauthorized structures while maintaining good neighbor relations. So, really great example. And then one section I really liked here that was missing from the other one is the stewardship monitoring and activities section. It just really clearly outlines planning into sort of the action items, what you're going to do on the ground and how you're going to track and carry that forward over time. So I think that, yeah, this is a nice template that offers some flexibility and then also gives some, taking a step back from these templates that it's clear that the formats are helpful. They may look slightly different, but they all do those same core things of organizing that key information and really connecting that planning to action in a scalable way for, a number of different people in your organization who may be looking at that either now or in the future. So that leads us into the many benefits of having land management plans. First, they're creating clarity for stewardship decisions. When you're out on the property trying to make those day-to-day calls, you have this sort of shared framework to guide those choices. It also really helps support, staff, board, volunteer transitions, whatever it may be. A lot of this work often depends on, or, in happenstance, there are people rotating in and out, and the plan sort of helps keep that institutional knowledge from walking out the door with the person. Um, Similarly, over time, it's building continuity across the life of the property. So you're not really starting from scratch every few years. You're building on what's already been documented and learned. Again, treating it kind of as a living document is very helpful. It also helps prioritizing that work and thinking about funding and where to prioritize. Yeah, if funds are limited, how to make things happen in the best way that you can. And at the end of the day, all of this supports that strong, consistent stewardship that protects the land long term and helps maintain those public confidences in how the property is being managed by the land trust. So I think I went through that fairly quick. Sorry if it felt quick to you. Um, I just wanted, before turning it over to Tom, just to quickly discuss the difference between a land management plan and a forest management plan. And I think Tom's going to dive into this a little bit too. Um, so a land management plan is the overall stewardship plan for the whole property. We talked about it's the best practice from Standard 12B, and it's bringing together those goals, the uses, risks, and sort of your general management direction. And a forest management plan is a technical plan that's focused on forest conditions and management. It's usually developed with a forester and is not required for the land trust accreditation. Excuse me. And the key point is that really these tools are meant to work together. They complement each other in a lot of ways, with the land management plan kind of setting that overall direction, and then the forest management plan providing that deeper technical detail for forested areas when that's the goal. So yeah, thanks for everyone. Thank you everyone, and I'll pass it over to Tom now.
Hi everybody. I'm Tom Worthley. I'm with the University of Connecticut, forestry educator, and I am going to share my screen here very quickly, um, and bring up some slides to share with you. Hopefully, everybody can see a slide that's titled Forest Management Plans, Ensuring Future Values, Benefits, Enjoyment from Your Forest Land. And as a way of introduction, I'll begin with a couple of the comments that Mariah made about establishing goals and providing direction and providing continuity over time uh, in terms of having a land management plan. And with respect to a management plan, a land management plan, and a more comprehensive forest stewardship plan or forest management plan, there's a lot of overlap. You will want to make sure that you have some idea about the condition that you want the property to be in, the parcel to be in the future, and what the uses of it are going to be, and and if your organization develops a land management plan for a parcel, a lot of that information can be used to inform a forest management plan, which is, as Mariah mentioned, a bit more technical and a bit more specifically applied under certain circumstances. We use many names for forest management plans, forest stewardship plans, conservation activity plans, a tree farm plan, and there are others. And I have one definition here, and it's one of many. A forest management plan is a site-specific document developed for a forested parcel in which forestry-related conservation activities or practices are prescribed and scheduled to address one or more concerns. And there are some key words in that definition. As I mentioned, there are many definitions for forest management plans, and management plans in general for other types of land, whether it's rangeland or grassland or something like that, might follow something similar. But it is site specific. And it contains recommendations for activities or practices that are prescribed and scheduled. These are actual actions that are taken on the ground to address resource concerns or interests of the landowner or the organization, as it were. And so I have a couple rules I'll begin with here. If you don't actually intend to do anything, if you're just going to acquire the parcel and let it sit and let nature take its course and keep people out, well, you probably don't actually have to have a management plan, except for maybe maintaining the boundaries over time. As Mariah mentioned, you can have a lot of similarities amongst the various plans for various parcels. You can use similar language for similar activities. And so those content similarities do exist, but each plan is unique and tied to the parcel and reflects the overall philosophy, if you will, of the organization itself in terms of how they manage all of their parcels. These are guidance documents, and they address both landowner interests and resource concerns, and one tends to inform the other. For example, if a landowner or an organization is very interested in, say, habitat for birds, then the resources concerns would revolve around optimizing habitat conditions for birds. If, on the other hand, the landowner has an interest in recreational values first, then the resource concerns would revolve around those recreational activities, protecting soil and maintaining infrastructure and that sort of thing. Over time, management plans are all adaptable. Conditions change. That's the nature of the world we live in, and the management plan needs to be adaptable. We don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over the climate. We don't have control over the insect infestations and that kind of thing. So very often addendums or adaptations need to be made to plans to reflect those changes that might take place. Most plans are time framed. Then in that they reflect, here's our look over the next 10 years or the next 15 years or the next 20 years. And at that point, we're going to reevaluate and modify the plan accordingly. Some common features amongst all management plans, including some of these land management plans, would be this visioning piece, having some idea about the goals you want to achieve. How are you planning to use the property? And are you planning that the property continues to be used in that way for the next 20 years or 50 years? What kind of forest conditions do you anticipate having 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or even 100 years from now? I'm working with an organization in Connecticut, and their idea is to have 100-year-old oak trees there 100 years from now, which means they have to start with 1-year-old oak trees now and make plans and take actions to ensure that that will happen. There's always some sort of assessment or evaluation that determines the existing conditions on the property. Now, a lot of times, much of this work has been done if you've done a documentation report or if you've prepared a land management plan. You've already documented a lot of the existing conditions on the property. But in a forest management plan and working with a professional forester, a certified forester in the state of Connecticut, you will anticipate that the forester will do some sort of resource inventory. That means a detailed quantitative assessment of the forest conditions, species mix, size ranges of trees, density of forest stands, arrangement, spatial arrangement of structural features and so forth and so on are all part of that inventory or evaluation. The management plan will eventually produce recommendations. And these are tied to that visioning piece that you did earlier. If you have goals that you want to achieve in terms of habitat conditions or something like that, then the recommendations will be directed to those achieving those habitat conditions. If I want to have such and such a habitat condition grow over a period of the next 5 years, what sort of condition do I need to create tomorrow in order for that to happen? And this would be something that's prescribed or recommended in the management plan. There would be, of course, a schedule for this kind of thing. And these activity schedules are very important with respect to prioritizing actions that you wish to take when you're managing forest vegetation or forest conditions, as it were. And when an organization owns more than one parcel, let's say you have forest management plans developed for 5 different parcels, being able to compare those activity schedules so that it's within the capability of the organization to be able to accomplish those things is very important. And then, of course, a monitoring piece so you can adapt as necessary and review and reevaluate after a certain period of time. Here's a resource concern. There's a photograph of a stand that contains beech trees that have both beech bark disease and beech leaf disease, and they are responding by sending up all of these root sprouts and clones. This is not a natural condition. When we would consider the forest, the pre-settlement forest, let's say, for example, we might have 5 beech trees in a certain area, and now there's 5,000 of them. And this certainly is a resource concern with respect to biodiversity, with respect to forest health, with respect to carbon sequestration, with respect to habitat management. And so this is one example of a condition that somebody might face and that would need to have a plan with actions recommended to address this, but to have a goal in mind. If this is not the condition that we want on our property, then we also need to be able to state, in some way, shape, or form, what condition do we want? And a forest management plan will call on you to actually be specific about that, not simply, I want to have a nice, healthy forest. While that's a great overall goal, a nice, healthy, resilient forest, a lot of times we need to be more specific than that. Well, what do we mean by that? What's the age arrangement of ages, different ages of trees? What's the species mix we seek? What's the density we seek? And those are the kind of things that your forester can help you with in your forest management plan. And so resource concerns may include things like the condition of the soil and the health of the soil, biodiversity. Do we have the optimum diversity of species that we would seek on any particular parcel? The health of the forest. If the forest is in a place to protect source water or stream water quality, that might be a resource concern. Habitat for various animals, reptiles, ground nesting birds, things of that nature might be things that we wish we had in better condition. Timber quality might be a resource concern for some landowners and some organizations. The diversity of age classes and vertical and horizontal structure in the forest in order to provide the greatest opportunity for resilience might be a resource concern. And we look at all of that in the context of what the interests of the landowner are. Now, the organization might be mostly focused on public recreation. They might be mostly focused on habitat quality for a certain suite of animals. They might be interested in maintaining forest resilience in the face of climate change first. They might want to maximize carbon sequestration, biodiversity. Dollar value, perhaps, is a very important factor for some groups. The growth rate of trees might be also a factor. So these are some examples of landowner interests that we would take into account when identifying, well, what are the resources concerned? If my priority is habitat quality, I'm going to look at that assessment, that evaluation, that forest inventory, and see if it meets my expectations with respect to habitat quality, both now and in the future. And if it doesn't, then I need to be able to determine what actions I need to take now to improve that habitat quality. And so this visioning piece is important, understanding what the long-term goals, anticipated uses, desired future conditions might be. We ask how would we like things to be in the future in terms of with respect to forest, in terms of habitat quality, in terms of tree sizes, in terms of species mixes, and so forth and so on. We in Connecticut love our oak trees, but the oak forest is slowly being converted to a mixed hardwood forest because of inhospitable conditions for oak seedlings in many places between deer browse and understory shade. And so if our interest is in having oak trees in the future, well, okay, what can we do to put things on that trajectory? The inventory will help us to understand and quantify all of that. This assessment also includes other types of observations, not just the numbers, and also evaluates observations of historical uses. And this important piece, what kind of trajectory are we on? And so we ask the question first about how would we like things to be in the future? What sort of forest do we want to have on this parcel? And then we ask the question, what do we have to work with? And if we are on the trajectory to eventually have that condition we're looking for in the future, well, okay, great. If not, then we can identify what kind of steps we need to take in order to, or we might suggest to take in order to put things on that trajectory that you expect. And this is where the recommendations come in. If conditions are not producing desired values to produce those future conditions you seek, then what different conditions can be created that would? What actions are appropriate given the uses of the property, and how can those actions be implemented and on what schedule? And these are important questions that your organizations need to be able to address. Are we working with strictly volunteers? What are our capabilities? Do we have the capability of engaging with some kind of contractor to do these things? Is there assistance available, technical and financial assistance from government organizations? And that might be the case. So here's an example of a resource concern. Here's this Japanese barberry that's overtaken the understory, the ground shrub layer of this forest patch, and we want to take that that concern and concert it and convert it to something different, to go from one condition to the other. Notice this pair of trees in the foreground. They're a little bit more in the background in the original photograph, but I wanted to include those to make sure you understand this is the same location. And so it is possible to do these things, but we need a plan to accomplish it, and have an idea of the condition, be able to describe the condition that we want to create in the process. Here's another example. I'll point out this large old tree, this large old white oak tree that is a dominant tree in this stand. It's a pretty old tree, pretty large tree. This tree measures probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 inches in diameter, and we estimate it to be older than 200 years old. Now, white oak trees have the capability of living to be 300, 400, 500 years old if given an opportunity. But this one is losing the competition battle at the canopy level because since the time it was a pasture tree, the forest has grown up around it and is now taking up crown space. And it's also a prolific seed producer. And so we're hoping that we can buy a little more time for this tree to be able to have sunlight to its crown and continue to produce acorns and continue to live for another few years as a large old tree. And so we needed to come up with a plan for how we were going to accomplish that, what we call daylighting of the crown, or crown release, if it were. And so these are examples of identifying a resource concern that aligns with the interests and the capabilities of the landowner, and then moving to implementation. I don't have the numbers to share with this one here in terms of numbers of trees and species and so forth and so on. But in the left-hand photo, you can see that a lot of the taller trees around this white oak that we were interested in are black locust trees. And as neat as black locust is in terms of wood that's decay resistant, the wildlife folks happen to consider it a non-native species. And so removing black locust here was one of the things that we did in part to release this tree. So content that you'll find in a forest management plan generally follows the outline that you see from the table of contents we took from a management plan for the parcel that's pictured down below. We have background and site information, and that can be more or less detailed as it needs to be, address, deed references, so forth and so on, almost exactly like you would find in the land management plan if you're working with a consulting forester. The forester will put their identifying information on there, and so everybody is involved. If there is a relationship established with Natural Resources Conservation Service of the USDA to help with technical and financial assistance for the planning, then their information is also included here. And there's a signature page that reflects that both the forester and the landowner have acknowledged what's in the plan, because they will use this plan to establish additional contracts with NRCS for assistance. And the contents here include some kind of executive summary of the plan, the variety of different kinds of maps, a discussion of the history of the parcel. Some plans include a map that reaches out to data that the state has from aerial imagery that was flown in 1935, and can actually include a map that shows what ground conditions were like in 1935 and compare it to the present. A lot of our forest land, the history of it is that it was forest land and then it was agricultural land, mostly pasture, and now it's gone back to being forest again. So history very often is very simple, but not always. There's other things that often go along with it. There might be a history of charcoal production. There might be a history of some kind of plantation that was there for a while. Certainly the goals of the landowner or that visioning process is discussed. And I use goals and objectives in two different ways. That's my bias. I'll stop right here and I'll talk about it a little bit. I mentioned earlier that we might have some long-term vision, some long-term goal that we want to accomplish in terms of habitat conditions, for example. And we need to grow that. We can't produce it. We can't buy it off the shelf. We need to generally grow that condition, and we need to create conditions in order for that habitat feature to develop. And this is one example. And the habitat feature would be the goal. Well, the ultimate goal is to actually have the birds come in, and utilize that habitat. But we have to have the habitat first. The objective in this example is, what conditions do we need to create tomorrow in order for that to happen? And so I use goals and objectives in different ways than a lot of other people do. I think of goals in terms of long-term and but doable, and not quite so specific, where objectives are short-term, measurable, doable tomorrow with the capabilities that we have. You'll have your evaluation of existing conditions, and along with those goals, you'll have an expression of what you wish the future conditions to be. A CAP 106 forest management plan is a designation that NRCS uses, and they require a certain number of different kinds of maps, and these are delivered to the client in a document that includes the various things that are listed here under the table of contents. So, for example, a location map. Here's our parcel outlined in green, showing where in the world it is with respect to the surrounding landscape. This one happens to be adjacent to UConn campus. Here's a closer up view of it, zoomed in on a leaf-off aerial imagery, showing some details, some features, if you will. A proposed trail. There's a stream that runs through the property. Outlined in orange are the different stand type designations. These are areas that are distinct from each other in terms of species mix or age class distribution or condition, if you will, that make it separate from, or distinguishable from some adjacent area that's different in terms of species mix, age, structure, or condition. And each one of those stands, and there's 5 of them here, will have a different set of records and a different management prescription depending on what the landowner wants to do. They've also included some notable trees here because that's one of our interests, and this would be a stand and features map. They might also include a map that shows where sensitive wetlands might be. Here's a map taken from the LiDAR imagery, a terrain map, if you will, that shows the ground features. This is from the CT Eco site. This is a different parcel altogether because the other parcel didn't have much difference in soil types. So I chose a different parcel that had a bigger variety of soil types. But NRCS has a web soil survey where you can get information about the different soils on the property and descriptions of them to include. Foresters will utilize that information and include it in the management plan because they want to know where the wetland soils are. They want to know where the sensitive soils are, the steep slopes, erodible soils, and certain soils are more conducive to certain species mixes than others. Certain soils are more conducive to certain habitat features than others. And so it's important to have this kind of information. Another different parcel altogether. This one is done in a very colorful way by a consulting forester, where they have shown the recommended treatments that they have suggested in the management plan and color coded, but shown spatially on the map. We're anticipating a certain type of activity in this location and a different type of activity indicated by a different color at a different location, and so forth and so on. And that would be accompanied by other details. Let me jump ahead real quick. That map would include reference to a table like this that shows the schedule for all of those different activities that are suggested or recommended, as it were. Going back, the forester would include detailed information like in this case, what we call a stand table. For each one of the forest types on the property, they would include this level of detail in terms of numbers of trees per acre, arranged by size, in this case, diameter at breast high, and species. So we have a picture in our mind of, in this case, it's pretty much an oak stand. You'll see 4 different kinds of oak arranged across the top, and the bulk of the larger trees are oak trees in this stand, and then a bunch of the smaller trees are other hardwoods, sugar maple, red maple, black birch, and beech, a little bit of hemlock showing in this mix. This would be what I would interpret that as being some kind of subcanopy or understory condition. And so foresters will use that kind of information to begin to develop management prescriptions. You might also have a landscape context map that allows you to reflect on what else is going on in the neighborhood. Are you preserving the last forested parcel in an otherwise developed area, or are you looking at a forested parcel that's much part of a much larger forested landscape because your approach to management of habitat or recreational values or timber might be different. Not everything is possible on every acre. That's my third rule here, or even on every parcel. And so if we can look at what else is going on in the landscape, then we can see what might be needed in this landscape. We are in a landscape, for example, that part of a much larger forest that's very uniform in age and species, and perhaps we want to mix things up a little bit in order to build in some resilience. And we also have to remember rule number 4, forestry is a long game. The decisions that you make today you may not be around to see the ultimate results, but you can be confident that you've placed things on the correct trajectory, if you will. And by having these plans, then the next board of directors, the next generation of landowners, the next owners of the property will be able to understand what you had in mind and be able to pick that up and carry it forward. In terms of working with foresters, there's a lot of text on this slide, and I apologize. I lifted it right off of the Connecticut Deep web pages, and since this webinar is being recorded, why you'll be able to go back and review it. But in Connecticut, foresters are certified or licensed, and they are a part of the licensing program they have for forest practitioners in general. And it covers people who get paid to do things in the forest. Your forest products harvester, for example, your logger or your firewood cutter, if they're operating a certain amount of volume every year, they need to have a certification. If you're in the position of supervising people like that in the forest to get projects done, you may have a supervisor certification. But if you're a forester, there are some activities in which you can engage that people with other certifications cannot. And they are listed in these first two sentences in the green box. You may plan or design forest practices, including forest management plans and silvicultural plans. And this is the purview of foresters only. Okay, you need to have a license in order to develop a forest management plan that's accepted by any of the government agencies. You may also represent a landowner, that includes a land trust, as an agent if there is any kind of sale or exchange of commercial forest products or other commercial activities, such as hiring a contractor to treat invasive species, for example. The forester can represent your interests in that sort of exchange. Some insights that I have over time. A long-term vision does identify those attainable goals. And the trajectory towards those attainable goals is set by defining an immediate desired condition. And that's what I call the objective. We have goals long-term, we have objectives that are more short-term and well-defined, quantifiable, and doable. We identify the appropriate activities to address a resource concern, and then create those immediate desired conditions. From there, we apply whatever the correct silvicultural prescription is. Silviculture is a term in forestry that's about growing trees. One of the unfortunate things about the science of silviculture or the practice of silviculture is that a lot of the language in it involves the cutting of trees or cutting of vegetation. And but it really, if it's applied correctly, then we are creating conditions we're identifying what we want to grow and creating conditions to do that if we're practicing our silviculture correctly. And it isn't until we've identified that resource concern and decided what condition we want to create that we apply the silvicultural prescription. In many management plans that I have read, the forester does a very good job of telling the landowner what their existing conditions are and then make a recommendations without spelling out what conditions they're trying to create. You know, they do that in their heads. They do that on the ground very nicely, but it's very often not spelled out in the management plan. And if there's one insight that I would share with you is to ask the forester, what conditions are we creating? How many trees per acre are we going to have when we're done? What's the species mix we're going to have when we're done? What's the spatial arrangement we're going to have when we're done? That sort of thing. So, And if we focus on what we're growing and the conditions we're creating, then what we remove reveals itself. And if you're working with volunteers, then skills training can be part of your plan. And we're there to help with that. The photograph on the right-hand side was just sent to me. I shared it with Ricky. In the background, you can see this stand of oaks and hickories and various other things with a stand of sick beech trees in the understory. And we've set about removing that sick beech tree understory with the idea of releasing oak seedlings, baby oak trees that are already present on the ground, just waiting for a little bit of space and a little bit of sunlight. And they made the decision, we would rather grow healthy oak trees than sick beech trees. And so they have a management plan. We help them to interpret that and provided some skills training so they can go about and accomplish that short-term objective to achieve that long-term goal. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know what kind of time we have left here. The next few slides were just a quick review or a quick introduction, if you will, about how foresters utilize this technical information. But if people are not interested in it, why, we can do that some other time. But essentially, we begin with this stand table again. We look at the trees that are larger than 4 inches. We have 240 per acre. We can graph that data if we want. We can express that in terms of basal area, which is the cross-sectional area of the trunks of the trees compared to an acre. And we have 112 square feet of basal area per acre in that stand. And if we look at the basal area distribution by species, we can see that it's very heavy to the oaks, very little to the smaller trees. And when we graph those data, we see this double spiked kind of total that we have. And what that tells me is there's a certain amount of these trees that are slower growing and a certain amount of trees that are faster growing. And if I want to work with my faster growing trees, my healthier trees, my more robust trees, if you will, then I'm going to determine using a guideline that foresters use for this kind of thing. I'm going to look at my existing conditions, which is that 112 square feet of basal area on the y-axis here, and that 240 or whatever it happened to be trees per acre, and see that, yeah, that stands a little overstocked. We could thin it out and put it in a better condition for the healthier trees to grow faster if we wanted to, at around 150 stems per acre and 80 square feet of basal area. We'd still be fully stocked with oak trees, but there would be fewer stems, and those stems would be the ones that are the most robust, and they would eventually grow up and they would have some room to grow here. So that's kind of how the foresters make that kind of decision and develop those prescriptions, if you will, based on the landowner's interests. And just an example of how that kind of thing works, they use this quantitative data to accomplish that purpose. Somebody wants to dig into this a little bit deeper, why, they can send me a note and let me know. So with that, I'll say thank you. I'll take questions, or both Mariah and I will take questions with the time we have left. If you want help interpreting a management plan that your organization has prepared, we're happy to do that. We do skills training on site. We can help you with goal setting and visioning if you'd like to. Just give us a call or send us an email, and we're happy to make those arrangements with you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much, Mariah. Folks have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, the Q&A section at the bottom.